To weigh now on the two Lekgotlas that took place when it comes to the PAC as well as the ANC. To expand on this a bit more further, we're now joined political analyst Dr. Dale McKinley, and he joins us now via our video link. Dale, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. Now, of course, we've seen the two political parties meeting this weekend, and it seems as if most political parties who are meeting at this weekend, most of them discussing the issues around the Expropriation Act that has been signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And dealing with the PAC first, Dr. Dale, what is your take when it comes to the PAC's Lekgotla, which mainly was centered around land reform and land redistribution?
Yes, good evening, Bali, and to your viewers as well. Thanks for having me on. Look, I think the PAC is trying to take the space that has always been expected to take, which is the land issue. That has always been its main political program. It's always been what it has said over the years. And now that it has a minister that is in the cabinet of the GNU and who's the Minister of Land Affairs as well, that opportunity now exists best in many years now. So with the expropriation bill, I think what the PAC is rightfully saying is that the slow pace of land reform in the last 30 years or so is not acceptable. We still have a situation, and particularly I noticed in the comments coming out of the NEC the importance of the follow-up. In other words, support, post-distribution support. And I think this has been the Achilles heel of the land redistribution program. It's not that some land has not been redistributed, certainly not enough, but there has been quite a lot of land redistributed. The question is the use of that land and the support for that land. And I think that is the key area. So if the PAC can push that agenda, can make and put it onto the mainstream, and they're going to introduce this bill, well, then I think all the better, because the rural economies of our country are suffering greatly, and land remains a crucial component of that, particularly for small and medium-scale farmers, black farmers. So I think it's a positive development. It's good to see the PAC speaking again about this in a way that makes quite a bit of economic sense and political sense at the same time.
And Dr. Dale, something that also came out today from the Lekgotla is the issue around, the PAC wanting to initiate a bill in Parliament to see a land restoration and also payment of reparations. And now that we find ourselves under this GNU, where a number of political parties are represented in Parliament, what's the likelihood of a bill like this succeeding?
I think it's fairly decent. The likelihood is fairly decent. I mean, if we look at the numbers, we know who's going to oppose this bill. The DA will oppose it. The Freedom Front will oppose it. I'm not so sure about the IFP, that it could go either way. Action SA and the Patriotic Alliance, again, it would be up for grabs. But I would imagine that the ANC, the EFF, and probably the Mkhonto weSizwe party would all be in support. At least their official policy positions would support this position, would support speed up land reform. They might bring some other things to the table and try to obviously influence that debate on that kind of bill. But I think overall, it looks like if you have the numbers, there would be a majority, in fact, above 60%, that could pass this kind of bill. So I would say that, and certainly supported, I think, by the majority of South Africans in terms of the need for better land reform and better management. So it's not simply the bill, it's obviously the kinds of resources that are going to be given, the capacity that will be given, but I think overall it would have the kind of support to pass.
And Dr. Dale, dealing with the Expropriation Act that has been signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa, one of the GNU partners, the DA, has laid a formal complaint, or says they will lay a formal complaint. And of course, the PAC now coming out saying that, well, even though we are a GNU partner, this is something that we will not support. And does this have the potential really to break this GNU coalition in which we are seeing in the country, where some partners in this GNU are in support of, some of the laws which we've seen, particularly dealing with the issue of land and dealing with the Expropriation Act?
Look, my perspective is that it won't result in the breaking up of the GNU. I think there is politics at play, and we expect this. There are different positions. Everybody knew going into this GNU, that the DA had a particular opposition, not only to the expropriation bill, but to the NHI, the National Health Insurance Bill, as well as several other priorities of the ANC. So I think what we are going to, and I think the democratic process should allow to happen. In other words, if the DA wants to take it to the Constitutional Court, which they said they want to do so, or the High Court, let them do so. That's the nature of our democracy. I don't think it means that a government must break up simply because two parties disagree on a particular question. I think there are forces within the ANC that would like to see the GNU broken up. That is very clear. And they will probably make use of this kind of space to argue that position, that this shows that we can't trust the DA, that we must move away from them. But I think, the dominant faction or the dominant position in the ANC around President Ramaphosa is that this is the nature of politics. We're going to have our differences. We're going to pursue our particular policies. So I think really, if there's going to be any threat, it would be from the minority parties. In other words, the really minority, the DA. And I don't see the DA pulling out of the GNU over the Expropriation Act, precisely because when you actually get down to the real debate about the expropriation, it's not that much different than what we actually have already on the board. It gives it a bit more power to the state to determine the compensation issues. But relatively, I think the majority of South Africans support this, and if the DA was seen, as the PAC pointed out, to be defending apartheid-style land policies, they would lose more support, I think, than they would gain. So I don't see the breakup of the GNU happening. I just see normal politics, debate, and some argumentation and political positioning taking place.
Yeah, and let's move on now to the ANC's Lekgotla. I mean, they've been holding a 3-day Lekgotla, which ends off tomorrow, and today being day 2, number of issues, being discussed, despite the fact that the Expropriation Act also overshadowing this Lekgotla taking place just before the Cabinet Lekgotla. And when it comes, to the ANC's Lekgotla and the importance of it, how important was day 2 of this Lekgotla, especially that we know that some of the issues being discussed needs to find itself in the State of the Nation address?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes we pay a lot of attention to the big things. As you mentioned, the Expropriation Act, the NHI, the big sort of, disagreements within the GNU. Is it going to break up? But the real sort of meat around the bone of the state is practical policies that were just mentioned by the ANC, which, for example, are industrialization policy, support for SMMEs, which I myself and many other political economists have argued has been sorely lacking in our country. If you want to grow the economy, if you want to create better local economies, if you want to try to create better employment opportunities, then grow local economies through small and medium scale enterprises, as opposed to always looking for big projects and massive foreign investment. And I think this is, so they're saying the right things, what we hear, but again, it all depends on the implementation. So in many cases, I think what we're beginning to see coming out of the ANC Lekgotla, particularly in the day 2, is a recognition that if the ANC does not address these key things, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
The President Ramaphosa has said it already. He said it at the Lekgotla. We're losing support. We've lost quite a lot of support. If we don't begin to address these bread and butter issues, if we don't begin to grow our economy, if we don't begin to create more employment opportunities, people will turn away from us. So it's not simply a question of political rhetoric anymore. It's real for the ANC. And I think that makes them take it a bit more seriously in terms of the implementation. Let's hope so, because the kinds of policies that they've outlined are not bad policies. The question is, are they going to be able to translate what's in the State of the Nation address into practical policy implementation and carrying forward that agenda?
All right, Dr. Dale, thank you so much for that insight. That is Dr. Dale McKinley, political analyst there, touching on some of the issues there when it comes to the various Lekgotlas which took place, that being of the PAC as well as the ANC.